So aloha and good morning. This is Clint Hansen with Maui Luxury Real Estate, and you've joined us at 11:10 a.m., 97.6 FM at 98.7 FM and 95.5 FM on the KAOI radio group. And this is Maui Real Estate Radio. You can go to listen this show as well as any other shows at mauirealestateradio.com or search for real estate at mauirealestate.net. Today we have Byron Yap, Paul Brewbaker, and Reta Chin, which this is our second economic update for the year. And but first, I wanted to kind of talk about something that's a little bit more immediate and with Byron. Hey, Byron, how's it going with your new office?
Good, very good. And new office is up and running. The only thing we're missing is our outside sign right now, which we think will be here in about 3 weeks.
Oh, excellent. But you've been cooking anyway. I mean, most people are finding their loans via referral and, of course, online searching. And
Yes.
that's one of the most important things I always find in the business is making sure you can work with somebody who knows how to get stuff done. And more importantly, is on island. Most of the times that we come into people that are looking to purchase here, they always have hey, what do you recommend for a loan? And I'm very grateful. But there are occasions when people want to come to me and they're saying, hey, I've got somebody that I work with. I'm a partner with a bank. I, even own a portion of a bank, and I want to work with my lender in the mainland. And especially with condos, there's a lot of idiosyncrasies in the lending process, and there can be absolute disastrous things that happen. So I'm always referring to a local lender. And Byron has been one of my top picks because he's very diligent, on top of it, and always gets a response out and meeting timelines, most importantly. That being said, how's interest rates with today's news, and how have your packages been going?
So far, I think this morning, or I think rates, when I checked them, they were still hovering like the last few weeks around the 3% range.
Mhm.
There hasn't been much of a big drop or anything. Of course, you can always buy the rate down below 3%, but it's been holding that way for the last several weeks.
It's been a great thing. I mean, I've refied my house. I got a lower interest rate and cash in the bank. It allowed me to, put solar on my roof,
Nice.
which is saving me more. So I have this, incredible equity that's built up with the inflation of properties recently. And it's just been out of control. I mean, there's so many people that are coming, ability to work from anywhere and or just looking to get their second home on Maui finally, now that they're moving closer to retirement. So that being said, we just got our most recent statistics out, and I wanted to
Nice.
have Rita take the chair and tell us a little bit about the craziness that's going on right now.
Thank you. This is Rita, and I have to remember we're doing radio. Well, as always, the market continues in the last 7 or so months, just heat up. And for those who don't know what the Maui market, or a healthy market, and I'll go back a little bit. For Maui, for all pendings, that means homes, condo, land, properties that are in escrow, a healthy market was about 500 to 550 pendings. When COVID happened, so that was March 2020, about a month later in April, that dropped all the way down to 324. Can I share my screen? Do you mind right now?
Please do.
Okay. Sorry, listeners, you don't get to see what I'm about to share, but you will. I know
That's quite
Paul,
a jump.
Yeah. Paul, the last time we saw each other, you were just amazed by this, as we are. Economists talk about any kind of recovery when it flies down. They always want that V recovery. Here in Maui real estate, it went down to 324. And as you can see in this little chart, just so that you know, pendings are green, blue is sold. So the market went from 324 of April 2020. It drove all the way up here, April of 2021, to 894 properties in escrow on Maui. And this morning it has leveled off, or even is so heavy at 753. So you will see with this graph here that literally the market has been so strong with pendings and sold. And just like you said, Clint, people have realized, one, they can work remotely. They buy here on Maui. They perceive Maui as a safer place. I've had the ability to sign a lot of sellers in the last 4 months or so with a tremendous volume. And there's a mix there of why people are selling and why people are buying. People are flocking here because, again, it's a safe place. But some sellers, what they've done is it's a great time to sell, and you can't blame people for getting the most that they want out of their properties, and they're selling. And I've had a couple, if you can believe it, sellers who had a real regret because they got super nervous with what has happened and they sold.
Yeah,
So
and the low part of the market. I mean, there was definitely a few deals out there that got renegotiated and or carried along with a lower price than obviously today can bear. But I wonder, at least in my experience, when we had the big drop off, we didn't have really a flood of inventory. People were really willing to wait out the market and let it change. And because they're willing to hold, many of them are bearing the fruit right now, the ability to sell at a high. To me, it looks like if you average these out, we still look at it a relatively normal curve. But the dip that I at least perceive and notice on a day-to-day in the trenches is more that there is that less inventory available and there's the same amount of buyers. The one thing that I've been kind of curious about is we usually have a fair number of Canadian buyers, and there are Canadians out there buying, but the rate seems to be percentage wise a little bit less. I'm assuming that it's just because it's harder for them to get back home, so it's less advantageous for them to come right now until there's an option to get back home without dealing with quarantine and work. I do have a few Canadian clients and friends that are actually here right now, looking or living here and have kind of been for a while, and they're just waiting for that change so that they can go back home. But again, that ability to work from anywhere extends to foreign national people. So that's why I'm a little surprised that we haven't seen some more, international buyers, other than just the difficulty of traveling. And of course, we have a pretty darn high international vaccination rate by comparison. So I think that the reason that we're seeing this dip now is really from a lack of inventory. I mean, I don't see as many options out there. And I'd like to see a full analysis of an average over this, past 2 years, see where that trend line is heading.
Just a couple of things that I want to point out in the marketplace that maybe your listeners may not know is that Maui County, we have the second highest median sales price for homes in the state at $975. And Kauai leads the way, if you can believe it. Theirs is $1,076,000.
Wow.
And Maui County for condos now, through May, we have the highest median sales price for condos. It's now risen to 620,000. With Byron on the phone and Paul here, this is the stat that I was blown away with. What I did is I searched from January 1st of this year till May 31st, and I pulled all the sold transactions for home sales on Maui. If you can believe this, 46% of everything that sold this year for homes on Maui sold at or over list price. That is amazing. For condos, all the condos that sold this year, 40% sold at or over list price. And so appraisals, I know with cash deals, Byron, you don't need appraisals, but I wonder, and I think about too, going along with that, the cash transactions, because 36% of the cash deals for home sales this year were all cash, whereas 43% of condo sales this year were all cash deals. What is that doing to property values, for future selling, for appraisals? Those stats to me are amazing.
So it looks like on average, if we took the condos and the home, about 40% were cash, 36 and I think 43. Wow.
For this year, think about that.
That's crazy. That's amazing.
Isn't it crazy? Yeah, that stat really.
What would be normal, you guys, Rita?
About 20, 25%. I mean, think about that. Almost half of the homes, people are coming here and they're buying cash. 43% are condo sales and then 36 home sales. It's a crazy number, tremendous volume. multiple offer situations going on. But it's nationwide, as you can attest to, Paul.
Yeah,
Yes.
I've actually seen, and one of the big problems that comes to getting new listings, which I've been pretty fortunate, I'm getting about a new listing a week. Normally,
Mhm.
I'll have anywhere from 25 to 30 listings, and I have less than a dozen right now. So with new ones coming on, they're usually going pending right away. And pricing always comes into an important part of this. The lack of inventory, I usually try to obviously shoot a much higher than the average cost. It always makes it very difficult when we have appraisal that has to come in, because appraisal uses yesterday's prices. It doesn't use the closings that are happening today. We're finally starting to see a lot of those closings happen, so that's helping us a lot. But still, people, what I'm writing into a lot of my offers is making sure that people have the ability to make up that difference in appraisal, because they can go ahead and call around to some of the other agents and be like, look, this one's pending, this one's pending, just go ahead and see what they're in escrow for, and and that'll help you understand the true value of why we're asking what we are. And it's helped us, but it is it's a bit of a leap of faith that people have to be willing to come up with that additional cash. And it makes an appraiser's job very difficult. Not only are they absolutely swamped with work, but they have a very difficult time. How's it been going with appraisals on your end, Byron?
Well, we've seen, I think the highest one to date was one that the appraisal came in, I believe, 600,000 below the purchase price that I've seen.
Wow. Wow.
I've seen some as on average about 35, 40,000 below appraisal. And a lot of it is because, with each sale, you're setting a precedent for the next sale, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what's happening is you only can work with closed transactions versus things that are pending or listed. So a lot of buyers, like you said, are in contracts where they state, hey, if the appraisal comes in lower, I agree to make up the difference in cash. And we're seeing that a lot.
We are as
Yeah.
well.
That does make it tough, obviously in such a competitive market for first-time home buyers, because they tend to have a lot less cash down. Obviously there's like Iliani, Kehalani and things of that nature, which they have opportunities to be in a lottery. And thank goodness those systems exist in order to get, people their first-time home purchase. But there is definitely a very serious shortfall, in the availability of single-family homes, condos for that matter. It's so repressively difficult in order to build here, specifically on Maui, but all of Hawaii, that they can't get that new inventory on there. Not to mention, I mean, affordable is this, idea, it should be an index of what we make, but it's just not true. Where the cost of goods to get here, the cost of building, the cost of living is so much higher here that there's just this inflated cost. I mean, we have this round hole, square peg, trying to get it in there, and we just don't have the ability to really create something actually affordable. So I've always proposed the idea of look, we have the biggest industry here is tourism, and there's got to be a way, instead of those tourism dollars getting funneled to mainland corporations or other countries, governments that own some of our local hotels, that if we instead have set prices where it's under the cost of building, but make it more profitable for a developer to build here. And the way they could do that is say, hey, you build this home, you can vacation rent it for 3 to 5 years. That means they're going to be probably netting over 100 grand every year. And that can reduce the cost of that housing, actually making real affordable housing. And then that satisfies and gives, local government the more willingness to approve and go through this process. It's a win-win for the people who live and work here, local developers, because that money's staying on island, and it benefits the long-term retirement plan of people who live here. So there can be real solutions to these major and serious housing problems that we're facing, but we have to come together and have a willingness to understand that the only way to help is to build homes for people who live here. And overcoming those goals is something that we have to work together. But it's not just our microeconomic problems that we're dealing with. We also are dealing, of course, with these big macro. I mean, the influence right now of Hawaii as a desirable location is just because of our incredible weather pattern and lots of people coming from all over the world here. And today, of course, we have state economist Paul Brewbaker, who's been on our show previously. Paul, please introduce yourself.
Hi, guys. Thanks, Clint, and nice to see you again. Rita, Byron, appreciate your insights. Yeah, I'm over here on Oahu and a private consulting economist. The doctor is in,
Yes.
and happy to help. Occasionally get called by people on Maui to make trouble, and always happy to get into it. I will say, Clint, it's important not to go too far down that rabbit hole because, for example, I think you really articulate.
Subsidization could be a
Yeah.
big negative. I totally understand.
Well, no. What I'm saying is, it's actually not as complex. You're absolutely right. The problem is on the supply side here in Hawaii, and in particular on Maui. That is, it's not possible to build more homes. The cost, what it costs to ship things here and what it costs, right? You're not going to change geographic isolation, remoteness, and the fact that the island is not contiguous to the other counties with public policy. But what you can change is the ability of developers to acquire the entitlement, the right to build on land that they own. That's the only thing that public policy can, or the only place that public policy can intervene, save for the other point you made, which is that some proportion, small proportion of households or the population is likely to have to be cross-subsidized by the rest of society as a consequence of economic outcomes that are out of their control, or choices that people make in their youth, in our youth, as we say, which lead them to fail to acquire the skills which later in life could have been, upon which later in life could have been built the incomes necessary to acquire and support the financing necessary to own a house.
Get in the game, get on the merry-go-round, because that's the best way to be able to afford a home is to buy a condo. Get it into a condo, build that equity, make the small payments that you're capable so that you can go into the future. And not to mention, it shows a track history, gives you the ability to show that your credit worthiness, ability to make a mortgage, and then you also, of course, build that equity. You may not want a condo, but it is a wonderful vehicle in order to get you forward. Everybody's, that I talk to that's looking for a home, one of the most important things is because they have a dog or a pet. And, condo life is not the easiest when you have an animal like that. And there's also very limited places that have a yard anyway. So, those have been really inflated prices too for the locals that are here. And but getting on that merry-go-round, even if it's something that you're not really looking for right now, is an important part to show a history and get it going.
Getting on the escalator of equity building through home price appreciation and the extraordinary ability to leverage small amounts of wealth into larger amounts of wealth accumulation that are available through mortgage finance. That's, you can't get this kind of loan to go invest in Bitcoin, but you can get this kind of loan on extraordinarily good terms. And as Byron has described, in a process that's much more secure. We've figured out all of the problems, or most of the problems, that have led in the past to financial crises and other excesses. So the mechanism design now is really tamped down so that the risk is in the system is relatively low, and you can get a 3% loan to buy real estate. That's
Unheard of.
20% down and a 3% loan. Man, you will never see another deal like that in your life. So if you aren't getting on the escalator now, you need to figure out how to do it. And as you point out, Clint, hey, brother, no shame. Buy the smallest you know, cottage in the back of the jungle just to start building some equity. And when I make
Mhm.
the list of the biggest mistakes I made in my life by not listening to people who knew better than I, or right at the top of the list is when I first moved back to Hawaii in the 1980s. 40 years ago, brother. When I moved back to Hawaii from living on the mainland, going to school and this and that, I met a young realtor who told me, he said, "No, bro, just buy just buy some small bus up condo anywhere, and eventually you'll be happy. At 4% appreciation per annum, the value of the property is going to double every 17 or 18 years. If you plan to live 60 more, then you need to get on that escalator." And of course, like an idiot, I knew better because I was 30 something. And and 10 years later, I find out it's like, oh snap, that's what he was talking about. By the way, it's a whole nother story. I was teaching, right? I worked at a bank, so of course I needed a second job, like everybody in Hawaii. My second job was teaching economics in college, and I had a student who was a mortgage broker, and I was whining about, this is like the boomers' lament. You're millennials. Nothing you say is new. I was a boomer, a 30-something boomer, whining about housing affordability and Hawaii's cost of living and the price of paradise and schmackety, schmackety, schmack. And after class, my student came to me, this guy, Bill Rizzo, I'll give him credit where his credit's due. Bill comes to me and says, "Hey, you know what? I think I can put you in a house, man. I think from what you described, I can help you figure out how to get in a house." Now, the whole family had to get in on the deal. Trust
Yeah.
me on that. You know what I mean?
Borrow from
Yeah,
aunties, uncles, grandma,
Tutu in the
grandpa.
deal, my
Yeah.
brother
Yeah.
in the deal, and then 10 years later, got my brother out of the deal, and he went to Big Island and bought 2.5 acres of lava, and he's a smart one because he made more money than the rest of us. But I'm just saying, don't wait. Look into it as early in your life, in your career as you can, and start planning. And the other thing, and I alluded to this earlier, I'm going to say it again, invest in yourself, invest in human capital. We all know how to Zoom. There's no reason you can't learn stuff right now online that will increase your skills, increase your productivity, and pay off in higher income over time. That's a fact, Jack. And too many people think you're just I'm going to stop at high school. And I'm here to tell you, brother, if you stop at high school, your competition is every other high school educated person on the planet. You gotta go farther than that now. That's the world we live in.
And education's gotten easier and easier. It's not anymore about going to a university. There's programs that you can get for free for
Take your pick.
certificates. Anything you want to do, you can basically get educated online. There's jobs that you can take where you don't have to leave home, and they'll pay for your education in order to get you to go forward, because there is a massive amount of opportunity out there. Of course, it might not be the job that you want right now, but it can lead you to the future that you want. And it's,
Well,
you know,
which kind of brings us back to what we're talking about today, because what's happening right now on Maui and elsewhere is a product of this point you raised, Clint, that one of the things we discovered in the pandemic, as if it wasn't obvious previously, is that we can do this instead of going to an office and spreading disease and spreading
yeah,
germs, spreading the cold that your preschool kid brought home to your family and then you brought to the office, in your open floor, what's the floor plan? Open floor
open floor
plan.
plan. Yeah. With the
Yeah, where everybody,
offices and no cubicles,
hey,
everybody's,
school started. Oh, great. Everybody's going to get sick again,
yeah.
So now, in addition to learning from home, which granted, some people are better suited for than others, but all people have the opportunity to try out. Chance them, you know what I mean? In addition to that, we learned that working from home is way more productive than
Isn't that
anybody thought
crazy?
pre-COVID. It's crazy how much productivity has been unleashed by work from home. Again, for the right people in certain kinds of occupations. And I'll straight up tell you, for higher educated individuals, not for people with lower educational attainment, but for those for whom it has been productivity enhancing, they now can work from anywhere. And the entire planet is sorting itself out. And what you see, I mean, we could go through the list of things that are the tip off that that's what's going on and not something else. But let me just suggest the 2 or 3 of the top things. First of all, it's not interest rates. Yes, interest rates are low, but they're low for all forms of housing. And where this is happening is in the single family part of the housing market, not so much in the condo part. What that tells you is people who are working remotely prefer to live in a detached dwelling rather than a multifamily structure. So that's pandemic related or post-pandemic related. It changed the way we think about habitation, where it's safe, and so on and so forth. Second, that fact alone, the fact that it's showing up in single family as opposed to condo prices, suggests it's not going to last forever. So this is not a bubble in the sense of all prices rising at extraordinarily rapid rates. It's just prices in the one segment versus the other. Condo valuations, if you look at Maui, are on the same path they've been on. The 4 or actually 5% appreciation is closer to the estimate that we've had all for the last decade, since the recession of 2008, 2009. So there's a more orderly market on the multifamily side than on the single family detached dwelling side, where you have this extraordinary shift in the nature of the workforce and the nature of the workplace that's playing itself out. But finally, that's a one-time thing. Pre-COVID, maybe 10% of all American workers were able to work from home. 90% of workers had never worked from home before COVID. And of the 10 percentage points that had the opportunity, less than 5% work from home full time. Right now, the federal government's now publishing these data right now, or as of April, May, I haven't seen the May data yet. It's about 20% in addition to those who worked from home before. So call that 5 plus 20 is 25%. For college educated individuals, it's 30%. Persons with an undergraduate degree. For persons with an advanced degree, it's 40% of workers. So a tilt toward the higher educated worker who is in a better position to embrace the flexible workplace or workforce design. But the point is, those numbers overshot during the crisis a year ago, and they're coming back, and they're going to settle at a slightly higher proportion. Maybe instead of 5 to 10%, it may be 20 to 25% at the end of the day. I'm not sure what it's going to be. But the point is, going from 5 or 10 to 20, let's say, plus or minus, whatever, that shift is what we're seeing right now. Just though that 10% of the workforce and their employers trying to figure this out, sorting it out. And eventually, when those guys have made their adjustment, it'll be done. So a one-time step in the proportion of the workforce working remotely results in a temporary boost in demand for single-family homes, which, as it dissipates over the remainder of this year, will result in those price paths for single-family and condo prices.
At least we hope it's temporary, because there's so many people who want to get into a house, and they have a lot of external forces.
My point is that they're finite. They're finite as a proportion of the workforce. So when it's over, when everybody's made their adjustment, they will have made their adjustment. And of course, it's more complicated than that, because people will try it out and then realize, oh, I missed the snow or whatever.
Moving back. So actually, one of the things that I noticed most starkly is, of course, the average rate of equity inside people's homes is one of the highest that it's ever been, from my understanding. In the last 40 years, there's more equity in properties. And I guess that's from people learning their lessons from 2008. They don't want to be on credit alone. Over this last year, the GDP versus savings is much higher too, right?
let's be fair to the bankers. They figured out that in order to make a good loan, borrowers have to have a stake in the outcome as well.
Absolutely.
So those down payment requirements are much more rigorously adhered to than before the last recession, where people were sort of going without down payments and, you know, without the proper documentation of sources of income and all this other kind of crazy stuff that we got rid of. The lenders now are much better at mitigating those, just preventing the risks of default from appearing in the first place.
I miss those pulse loans though. You could just state whatever you wanted and just they'll give you money, go buy a couple places, you know.
Ninja loans, no
Yeah.
income, no job or assets. Ninja.
Yeah.
Maybe this question is for Rita or Paul, but with the shift you were saying about working from home, what is that going to do to the commercial space? You know, have we seen a
That's
decline
just
in
it.
commercial?
Well, look at Kaahumanu Center. I mean, look at the commercial, all the spaces there, and look at along, the old Kmart area, that Sterry Road. I mean, it would be great to know from commercial brokers how many units or how many places have, you know, gone away.
Well, we'd have to have a whole nother podcast about the commercial side of this picture, because you're absolutely right, Byron. If I don't need to go to a workplace, then the vacancy rate's going to go up. If the most likely outcome is that the people who do work from home, the larger proportions of the workforce that are working remotely at least part of the time, it's most likely they'll be in hybrid arrangements where they go to the office or go to a workplace 2 or 3 times a week, but not 5 days a week. And then you thought it was bad maintaining an office where people work for 8, 9, 10 hours during the daytime, and then it sat vacant all night and weekend or whatever, right? Talk about, wow, what a waste of capital. Man, it's going to be worse if they're not even there, you know, if they're for a majority of days a week, they're not even in the office. And so in that kind of situation, the nature of the workspaces itself changes. It's going to be much more collaborative. And the yin and yang there is not everybody needs a dedicated office, but there may be a residual need for social distancing, and we're not quite sure how that's going to work out. And then that's just office. Then you go down the list. Rita mentioned shopping malls. Why do they even exist? Do you not have? I have 2 words for you: Amazon Prime.
I've gotten so good at that.
I don't go into Target.
Me either.
I go on my Target app. I order what I'm going to buy. I drive through the parking lot and they throw stuff in the back of my car. It's like, and then food service, really? You think that's going to go back to the way it was? By the way, I have PowerPoint slides for all this stuff if you want to look at it. But the point is, if you go through the list of commercial, you know, did we just get schooled about leisure and travel or what, right? We've got to start rethinking the nature of the destination and what it is we offer, the nature of traveler preferences in a post-COVID environment. Maybe they don't want to be in a building with 500 rooms and no way to get on an elevator without walking by people from other places, and the diseases that they just happen to be carrying around. So the mentality has to change in commercial real estate. By the way, I'm talking about tremendous opportunity for people who can creatively think about repositioning commercial real estate.
Yeah, one of the big transitions for malls has been to create a space in which people want to go, not just to shop, but for activities as well. You know, a blending of things to do, you know, whether that's working with county offices or state, you know, or, you know, entertainment, entertainment, you know, all these things that bring people in. It's not just about going to a movie, you know, it's about going to play on a ride or something along those lines. And the more that they can work on pulling activities in a central gathering place, the more successful they're going to be able to have the rest of these shops, you know, pull a cash flow from those guests.
Absolutely. If I want to buy something, this is how I buy it. UPS delivers it. If I want to go do something, then I go to a public space or if you think of a mall, a shopping mall, it's like a club good, except that you think of like a golf course, except that it's, open to the public in certain hours. And you're absolutely right. The whole shift is towards experiences as opposed to just merchandise. Go find on YouTube Macy's first quarter earnings call a month ago or so. Listen to the CEO talk about how they are planning to reposition their flagship stores right across America. Macy owns these amazing, 34th Street in Manhattan. What are you going to do with a massive space like that? You're not going to sell stuff that people can get online at this. Here's another thing. The price online is the same price everywhere online. There's no price of paradise cost of living premium because it's in Hawaii, right? It's the same price.
Yeah,
There
and that's
goes
one
your
of the
living cost
things
differential.
about and reasons to get online is you get the cheaper prices. I mean, even at Target, you can go through the store and you'll look at strawberries and they'll be, $6.50 to $10, but online they're $1.50. So they do price match no matter what. And they'll drop it down if you bring it to their attention, or you could have just bought the thing online in the first place and have them drop them off in your car, like you were saying.
Or you can be the person that realizes, wait, it's $2 on the mainland and it's $6 over here. There's a way for me to make money on that.
Yeah,
businesses
arbitrage.
Businesses have been caused to be more creative. So you look at, when we talk about commercial space, you look at the beautiful place down here, Paper Garden, here in Wailea. It's a paper card store. And what they've done during this last 8 months with limited number of people, they've offered entertainment in the form of getting together and doing wreath making. They've done candle making. So these businesses with commercial space are going to come up with other ways to get everyone back into their stores if they're going to keep them.
Absolutely.
That's why I think the mall, that's why I was telling my wife this weekend, I think the mall, if they, in the Sears spot, if they put a skating rink and a bowling alley there, that would be huge. I think that's my recommendation.
Oh, absolutely.
I
Yeah.
would go to a skating rink. I think a lot of people, I think a lot of people in the Western US, my sister lives in Phoenix, where it's going to hit 125 degrees today, evidently. And I talked to my son in Boulder, Colorado yesterday, and it was 96 degrees there. And I'm like, whoa, it's a dry heat, whatever.
It's a beautiful 87 degrees here every day, all day.
I have a question for Paul. Do you mind if I ask this? Because I was just listening to you Friday when you were speaking on that High-Rec Zoom. You said that this recession started in 2020 due to the huge collapse of consumption, personal consumption.
Yeah.
Would we, 8 months ago, what has driven this housing market though? I mean, nationally, not just Maui. I get interest rates. Would we have ever guessed this housing would drive us? Are we past the recession that started in 2020?
I tell you what, Clint, am I able to screen share? Because if I am,
go for it.
I'll show you some of this. First, I have to find. Anyway, I'll start in on your answers to your questions, Rita, because I first have to locate this actual file. There we go. So. This is the dead air part of the average.
Actually, I'm going to fill that dead air with one of the things about commercial properties that I've been saying for a while now is my concern has always been the default rate of big commercial loans, because when the subprime crisis happened with residential loans, that basically caused a collapse of financial instrument blocks. They basically compiled all these loans into these big unit numbers for cash flow for banks. The bank makes the loan, then they sell the loan to somebody, and then they consolidate it into a block, which is a financial instrument, and then they sell it back to the bank because they average out the risk assessment of it. Of course, the risk was way worse than people anticipated. The default rate got higher and the whole thing collapsed. Right now, we don't have the same collapse rate even anywhere near for commercial loans, but it is something I've been wanting to monitor and understand more clearly where commercial loans exactly are, because they actually make up a larger percentage of the financial instruments that are out there. And I would only see really the only opportunity for there actually to be a recession, in my opinion, is the collapse of those commercial loans, and drying up the monetary markets.
I think this question was more for Byron, but I'll just jump in because you're right. The fat lady hasn't sung in this opera, in the
Not at
sense
all.
that the commercial mortgage-backed securities market, which, as you point out correctly, distributes risk so that individual lenders don't hold all of the risk exposure in a particular building, is faced with some additional risk exposure. If you just think of it at the basic level, a bunch of landlords did not get paid their rent for much of the last year. But they're having to make these mortgage payments for the properties that they own and hold as income, ordinarily as income producing assets. So that has yet to work itself out. And as you know, we're approaching the end of the moratorium for evictions and for forbearance in the case of residential mortgage loans. And by the way, in terms of commercial loans, bankers have to be a little tougher because there haven't been the same sources of backstopping as there were through various federal relief packages and whatnot on the household or individual side. Having said that, nobody is interested in a disorderly restoration
Precisely.
of normality. And I think my sense of it is that the problem is manageable, but what I mean there is one actively has to manage it. I mean, leadership has to step in. My guess is that the traditional channels for resolution of these problems, which are judicial in nature, right? We have judicial foreclosure. My guess is that they're not up to the task. For one thing, the courts haven't been operating at 100% for the last year. They've got a backlog of cases to deal with. And just in general, it's not the most efficient way to resolve certain kinds of problems. So there's going to have to be some creativity on the part of banks and their borrowers and willingness to compromise. And possibly even, I mean, we'll see how this plays out at the national level, but possibly even some, thought about whether relief should extend beyond the immediate window of the pandemic experience into this post-pandemic environment where we work out these residual issues.
Absolutely. So were you able to share that page, by the way?
Oh yeah. Let's so here's what we were talking about earlier with the prices, and I've seasonally adjusted these Maui prices to illustrate a couple things. First, this is on the scale here is natural logarithms. So when you got a nice linear trajectory, as you see here, that's actually an appreciation rate that's constant. And this for Maui, this works out to something like 5% plus or minus a percentage point. I haven't estimated it lately. Then when you notice at the moment of the COVID event, this is the February of 2020, which is the official end of the previous expansion and the start of the recession. You can see how things drift a little bit and wobble in the case of condo valuations. And then where that shaded area ends, that's my interpretation of the end of the recession. The date hasn't been established yet. The official date hasn't been established by the National Bureau of Economic Research, but my guess is that somewhere as soon as July or August of last year, the recession ended. And then that's where you see this explosion since last July of single family home prices, but not so much in the condo space. So that's to make this point that I drew attention to earlier, that it's happening in one segment of the market versus the other, even where a low interest rate environment should be supporting both, even where the economic recovery should be supporting both, and even where the nature of the savings that were built up, right? There was a lot of wealth that was preserved. People got enhanced unemployment benefits when they lost their jobs, and other people cut back on their spending, which meant that they saved more over the course of the last year than they would ordinarily have done. These are the workforce participation numbers I alluded to earlier, where from 30 or 40%, we're down to maybe 20% of workers working at home, in addition to the small proportions who did earlier. But again, a pattern of remote work by educational attainment that favors the persons with higher educational attainment and higher skills. And then that one-time shock thing I was describing. I'm going to skip through this POW slide. Here's the point to which you alluded earlier, the fact that the recession itself had this weird pattern that it was concentrated in services, not so much goods. We kept buying stuff. We kept buying toilet paper if we could find it, disinfectant. But the services part dropped. Obviously, travel and tourism for Hawaii, arts, entertainment, performing arts, entertainment, record, they got hit disproportionately. And I illustrate on the right side here, food services got hit. We kept eating, if you look at food merchandise sales, but food services got hammered to have come back and are looking now as if they may not come back all the way. And then this is the point Reta was talking about. This is the US personal savings rate. And you can see that in the pre-COVID decade, it was about 7% of disposable or after-tax household income. It tends to jump around occasionally. If there's a tax cut, it tends to jump upward. There was a payroll tax increase, a reversion to the prior payroll tax rate in 2012. And you can see the savings rate built up before the tax increase. People got ready for it, or their HR department at their company. And then that savings rate dropped as the extra 2% of their income was taken out to put into the Social Security taxes at FICA. But there at the end, you see the impact of not just COVID-19, but these separate federal relief and economic stimulus efforts, the CARES Act in March of 2020, and then more recently, the ARPA, the America Rescue Plan, in March of this year. And so from a higher base, used to be 7.5%, post-COVID, 15% of household income was being saved. You had these windfall gains coming from the federal support. So people, built up some additional liquidity. And it makes sense, right? We call it precautionary savings because a thing you hadn't thought about, a surprisingly virulent and novel coronavirus shows up out of the blue, and you go into defense mode. Protect your family, protect yourself, stop spending money on stuff you don't need, stop buying pickup trucks, right? Now, and so
now you can't get one.
Now you can't find one because when people stopped buying and renting them, right? The rental companies sold their fleet. Why own an asset that's not generating any income? And we all went into a cave for a year. And now we're coming out to find that not only does it take a while for the factory, for the robots at the pickup truck factory to dial up their production, they can't get some of the components because every other factory on the planet has gone through the same experience. So they can't find semiconductors. Why? We all bought a badass laptop for our kid to go to school at home. And that's where all the chips went instead of into the control system in your Ford F-150. So all these things are going to take a while to sort themselves out. This is the year that happens, and in many dimensions, not just the ones we're talking about right now, but as we pointed out earlier, in the case of commercial real estate, plenty of opportunity for creative minds to think about how to redeploy assets so that they're engaged in productive uses. Now that we collectively, society has changed the way it approaches some of these economic behaviors. Not just temporarily because of the pandemic, but permanently because we figured out, why was I doing it then? Why was I not Zooming before?
Yeah.
Why was I driving for an hour every day to get to a job that I could do at home?
Blue jeans is so much easier whenever, I get invited to testify at the county. It's a little crazy to go actually down there and, be in these crowded situations around all these people, waiting, for them to get through the docket, and then only to something to get delayed to the next day. On blue jeans, I can sit there, go about my day and wait for my turn, and listen to things And actually it's so much more efficient than it has ever been, and it creates so much more accessibility. Obviously there needs to be some sort of blending of it so people who, you know, are technologically hampered can be there, but to me I think it leads a lot more community involvement, and you know, allows for a lot more of these things to function together, as opposed to, you know, just preventing people to have their voice from being heard, you know. So see it as a net benefit, and definitely a shift in the economy, but definitely a lot of these places, as you said, have to shift to more experience based. And Maui is the experience that everybody's looking for. It's the perfect weather. It's, you know, the aloha spirit, and the desirability of being here is, you know, unsurpassed.
I was in a Blue Jeans Maui County Council committee hearing,
Yeah.
just like you described 1 week ago, on this very contentious issue of, now that we're bringing tourism back, do we want it to be the way it was before? Can we do it differently? And the debate there was between people who who believe, I think mistakenly, that the blunt instrument of just stop, you know, don't build any more hotels, that's going to be effective, when the underlying problem is that we're not really managing the recreational natural resource use, for example. We're not really managing the congestion on the roadways. And we have technologies that can help with that management. So my point is that this technology right here, this way of communicating and meeting and sharing ideas and collaborating, does offer opportunity to engage in legitimate public policy debate. But also, I think it's going to require a new approach. I mean, you know, there are a lot of people can show up in a Zoom chat, and when everybody, you know, has a right to have their views expressed, there's a whole nother management challenge that comes from that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done webinars with 500, 800 participants. So you can't possibly have a conversation in that.
No. It does allow for a good, you know, voice to get out there, and this is a wonderful opportunity. It certainly made making the radio show a lot easier, as opposed to having people come into the station and record, and express ideas out there and get more involvement, which is really essential to our republic to operate. So
Absolutely.
that being said, what do you think about, you know, I know that you're not the biggest fan to interrupting free markets, but given the biggest issue, you know, being so geographically isolated here, as a means of subsidizing costs, what's your thoughts on special allowances for, you know, people who live and work on Maui, to create affordable housing by having rentals there for a period of time?
I think at the end of the day, some form of subsidization is necessary. The devil is in the details, it always is. But we the people had gone through a period a half century ago where public housing initiatives were relatively robust. There was you know, in the 1960s, there's a big move towards building housing owned by the public, owned by the government, by housing agencies, and then they would act as landlords. That, you know, that turned out to have its own problems. Unfortunately, my impression is that we moved too far in the opposite direction. For example, all this talk about P3 and public-private partnerships. I mean, name one that worked.
No.
That's my snappy comeback.
And that's
So
why I want local developers to have incentivized areas to be more profitable building these affordable houses, as opposed to the luxury homes, because there's literally losing money on an affordable project that they have to fight tooth and nail to make happen. And then, you know, if they can all of a sudden be like, oh wait, there's more profit in creating these affordable homes, and it actually benefits, you know, the locals who live here and the local developers. I mean, to me it seems like a win-win situation.
you know, we've toyed with dialing the rules and boundaries around. The latest version of that on Maui has been this, you know, ratcheting up of what are essentially production quotas. 25% of the homes to be built should be affordable by some arbitrary definition, and then it's 50%. Maui tried 75%. The mayor vetoed that one recently. what in
Oh, it's
economics,
impossible. Yeah.
well, what
It
you
just
find
means
in
nothing would build.
economics, well, that was happening at 25%. And I can tell you,
Yeah.
if you look at the data carefully, you can see that if building more houses was actually the point, I'm not sure it is, by the way, but let's just hold that to the side for a second. If building more houses was actually the point, what we're building now on Maui, which is 500 units per year, a few years ago, peaking at 850, maybe 10 years ago at 1,500. I mean, we built way more houses on Maui back in the day, as they say, without all of these regulations. So my impression is that it's the regulation that's actually reducing the amount of home building. And you have to remember the way that works. If you are a wealthy individual, you know, a .com refugee or something coming to work remotely in West Maui or South Maui, you're not, and you're having your home built, you're not subject to these restrictions, right? It's only the people who are building housing units in large numbers, like apartment buildings or subdivisions. And the problem there is that the way you make housing affordable is building it at scale, right? You set up and then you replicate it. You set up the neighborhood and you replicate it, or you design the building and then you knock out every room, or you pour a floor every week. And that's what keeps, right? You put more housing units on a piece of land, so the cost of the land per unit is lower. That's how you get there. But that's also where we impose most of these restrictions. And so ironically and perversely, it impairs the affordable home builders more than it impairs the wealthier home owner or prospective home owner, and fails to mobilize the cross subsidy that you and I suspect is somewhere lurking at the bottom of all of this. And there has to be a way, to subsidize lower income households. Now, I gotta quickly say, because I'm an economist and I learned the secret handshake. The way economists say to do this is not to subsidize in kind, but to subsidize in cash. And listen carefully to the debate that's going on in Washington and elsewhere about how we support families and low-income individuals and households going forward. Do we provide them with $300 a month per child? Just give them the cash per child in the form of a tax credit, not a tax credit you get next year when you file your taxes, but a tax credit which you get on an ongoing way in the way your payroll department sets up your withholding and whatnot. So housing vouchers are an example of that method. The more conservative elements in the range of economists and their views tend to argue that giving people who need subsidies or assistance, giving them cash and the flexibility to do what's best for them is a better idea than deciding that what they really need is a house over here in that building and that they should go live there in the ghetto.
I like that. I mean, I think it does make sense to, help with, specifically those particular features and needs of any economy everywhere in the US, but specifically directing Maui's or Hawaii specific problem. Housing and, the cost of living is the major expense that's out there. So that's the reason I think that, having this system of having tourism dollars coming in as opposed to a tax, taxes end up draining us specifically, as a community, a group, as opposed to having an infusion from external, source of an income coming here and staying here. Right now, what ends up happening with tourism dollars, the mass majority comes here and then gets funneled back out into other parts of the United States.
Now we're getting
world,
into
so.
wait, whoa, we reign. If you're concerned about that, buy Marriott stock. Then in the
Exactly, having an investment in your own community.
The key point that you raise, however, is that generating export income, which is income from overseas, is also potentially taxable. That is, it contributes not just to the tax base directly, but by creating the jobs and incomes and the economic activity associated with the people who are employed in the export sector, it generates taxes as well. So yes,
especially with
if you can manage the side effects like congestion natural resource degradation, cultural dilution, right? Manage the side effects, and then you can maximize the return on an export. And by the way, it doesn't have to be people coming here. If we were smart, we would be writing the virtual 3D software. I got that backwards, but fine, hire a 16-year-old to do 3D virtual destination experiences, and then Joe Plumber can sit in his bedroom in New Jersey or wherever Donald Trump says he hangs out, hacking people, right? Visiting Maui in virtual reality and buying stuff from us on the internet, rather than getting on a plane and coming all the way over here and spewing atmospheric carbon emissions all the way. There's room for all of this, by the way.
Yeah. Inability and infraction. So, hey, thank you so much. I really appreciate everybody coming today. It was a very illuminating process to go through and learn the current state of the economy, and I look forward to seeing where it's going. I actually have very positive feelings of the future, and I think that since we have our eyes open with a lot of these hurdles that are coming, that things are looking pretty sunny. We just have to make sure we get on that merry-go-round and keep putting that next foot in front of the other. Again, I'm Clint Hansen with Maui Luxury Real Estate. You can always go to our website, mauirealestate.net, to search for properties that may interest you. We're a local family that's been established on island for over 30 years now. I've had my license for 21, work with my family. They've had their license, I think there was dinosaurs around back then. And
I was there.
Don't
Right.
let your mother hear
there.
that.
And of
Dinosaurs
course,
and Jimi Hendrix.
yeah, they were. He was riding the T-Rex. So you can also go, of course, to mauirealestateradio.com to listen to this and any of all the podcasts. Paul, thank you so much. And would you like to say a little bit about yourself?
No. I'll see you guys
You're
next
good.
time.
You're
Thanks
good.
for
All
having
right.
me. Yeah.
And Reta?
No, I'm all good. Take care, everyone.
And Byron with Axia Home Loans, thank you so much for co-hosting with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Aloha and have a good day,
Aloha.
everybody.
Aloha.
Thanks.
Aloha, you guys.